For the world is changing. I feel it in the water, I feel it in the earth, and I smell it in the air. Chicago is one large city, like many, feeling the panic of the virus. Almost all public places will be closed for 2 weeks or more, as people prepare for the worst and hope it passes. As I spent all day Sunday waiting in lines at the grocery store, when we received the news suddenly that all restaurants would be closed and only takeout would be available. As I was there, I observed much around me as I stared at the empty shelves of food and supplies around me. No tissue paper, no paper towels, no hand sanitizer, no soaps. Much of the food has been ransacked as people prepare to hide in their homes for the next few weeks. It was a strange feeling as an empath to absorb all these feelings around me of panic, fear, and even confusion amidst the people. I witnessed a survival mode of humans I have not yet experienced in my own lifetime, and it made me think. The truth is, Governor Pritzker seemed to close down the city in an overreaction, a bit in flow with the government's panic and preventative methods. But there are strong messages that I am receiving, and it leaves me feeling very peculiar indeed. I am in limbo of being happy as well as sad, a bittersweet feeling in a way of saying goodbye to the old world and saying hello to the new earth. These times are a time that forces everyone to take a look at what is wrong with society and to fix it together. As J.R.R. Tolkien said, how do you move on? You move on when your heart finally understands that there is no turning back. I have been talking about the creation of New Earth together on my channel for a few years now, and I was hopeful to believe that this new Earth would come without pain. I should know by now that everything worth gaining causes pain in many ways, as a way to strengthen the spiritual muscles and show us how strong we really are inside. I did not expect to see so many deaths, though, but I also am not surprised, and deep down inside I knew that some souls would become a great sacrifice to building the new earth. This virus gives me very mixed feelings. It is not entirely man-created, as it is something that is found in animals itself, but it is man-made because of choices and consequences that lead to the creation of it. I do not believe it was created in a lab, yet it is an intelligence of its own that attacks weaker immune systems and leaves the young or the healthy alone with the sniffles or mild flu symptoms that go away on their own. And although it is very sad that the elderly who are sick already in hospitals, nursing homes, or at home unprotected, which is the majority of population of people called the baby boomers, are at risk, I am also happy to hear that the children in many ways are being spared. It is a symbol of life moving forwards, and this not being a death sentence for humanity at all, but in many ways a natural pruning. Pruning is something many horticulturists know that is done by removing selective certain parts of a plant, such as branches, buds, or roots, or deadwood, that are already dying in some kind of way, to ensure the survival of the whole bush or tree. Just as the ancient civilizations used senicide as a way to ensure food for the earth tribes, it is the old souls retiring from this earth, transitioning and moving on. Is it fair that people are dying? Well, death is a fact of life, but it is tragic that, unlike with the ancient practice of senicide, for many people it is not a choice, or at least not consciously. So either we have a virus created to cruelly depopulate selectively, or it is nature balancing Earth out, since Earth cannot sustain the human population while its oceans are being polluted and its forests being cut down to make more homes for the growing population of people. This could be Earth shaking itself in the form of an animal virus. We have reached a place of nature rebalance, and this is Mother Nature doing best what it does, destroying for regrowth. As everything in our reality, in many ways, the virus acts as a mirror to show us what we need to do better in society and what went wrong to cause such a pandemic in the first place. If we can learn from this moment in time and advance our civilization, then that is what matters most. Although this is a time for social distancing from each other, it will take a spirit of unity to overcome this together. There are many lessons we must face together that involves nature and how we treat it as a society. Just as there may be less meat in the grocery stores to buy, there also are other types of events that have been canceled that use animals, such as bullfighting in Spain. Events have been canceled, which has saved 120 bulls, I have read. So there are many positives to this negative situation if we can look at it from the perspective of the animals and from our care and concern about all beings living on this planet with us. Personally, I was appalled to learn the greater extent that wildlife farming had been taking place in China, along with other countries. They are not the only ones to blame. Alongside with the horrible conditions of factory farms and wildlife poachers in the wild, there is a capture of wildlife to eat them. I have had a hard time looking at those videos or ads on my feed that try to expose the truth of wildlife farming, and in many ways, now I have to face it. As a reflection of me with held back tears trying to ignore these pictures of bears, tigers, and all other wildlife in cages before they were mercilessly killed. Now I cannot ignore the origin story of this virus coming from a bat. Now we are facing the grim nature of the greed in humans, although at first we may not have wanted to because the suffering is too great to observe. These wildlife animals were not killed and eaten out of hunger, but out of delicacy and unnecessity, other than greed, that humans have shown this land. Many of these animals were never made to be eaten, especially snakes, bats, and other types of carrier animals that hold dangerous viruses as protective measures against being eaten in the first place. Meat was not there in the stores on Sunday, as everyone stocked up already because the restaurants were closing, and that made me get a vision of a more peaceful society for our dear animals in cages if there became less of a demand because of low supply on meat. People are being forced right now to buy frozen vegetables and fruits while the fresh produce has been picked through in the panic. As I stared at the empty shelves of food on Sunday as people were grabbing to fill their carts, a deeper message came to surface of what is truly going on in the world, with the pandemic as an opportunity to not waste. Although there may be some key players involved, we are ultimately at the highest level rebooting ourselves as a collective. Out with the old and in with the new, and yes, this means death of old ways and ultimately rebirth of society as a whole. Humans have entered a state of awareness where a wake-up alarm is being sounded, and society is finding themselves hitting a wall. The way people depend on companies and stores for everything is not healthy for starters as creative beings. It is not healthy that people have to run to a grocery store to depend on supplies for living and fight each other for the last soap or toilet paper roll, or peach. People in the past who lived off the land made their own items, and although we gained conveniency in this modern age to not make our own items ourselves, we paid a price for it too. Corporations have profited hugely on items we can all make at home if we put our minds to it. Shampoo, soap, cleaning supplies with natural and disinfectant ingredients, and possibly even toilet paper. It made me think about the past and the earth-based tribes and how they lived without the industrial period and the corporations who produce everything for a mass society. These corporations have charged so much for packaging, branding, and factory and industrialization processes of items humans used to know how to make with a little creativity. Although I do believe we should not completely go back to living in grass huts without industrialization or technology, there is something we have lost when we fight for the last Purell hand sanitizer instead of using our own alcoholic mix or just soap and water. I too am guilty of this laziness to depend on others to create, and although I try to make my own items like toothpaste and mouthwash, I realize today that I, like many others, have become dependent and forgotten how to be more creative myself. We are dependent on a broken system that no longer works well, especially in a time when you cannot get those items you need. Humans have lost their creativity to create their own items and depend on corporations with brand names to do it for us. I believe this is an opportunity to look at ourselves as individuals, as creative beings, and see what truly we need to buy and what we can make on our own. As the economy is going through a reboot too, and many interest fees are being reversed or paused, it means people will have to get creative and spend less on brand names and create their own items so that we do not depend on these economic systems like credit card companies and those that do have high interest rates and make money off of the people that way. Ultimately means that people would each have to create their own items they take for granted, and in this process they could help one another and share different skills and trade items that they have made as the old barter and trade without paper money. I have already started doing that with my clothing, as most of my clothes I buy is vintage or hand-me-down from certain types of trading sites. When it comes to creation of our own food, I believe everyone should have their own plot of land and garden that can grow some fruits and vegetables that they use most. There will still be plenty of work for farmers, but ideally, if every neighborhood could have a community garden, then everyone would eat less meat as it is and munch on more grains, fruits, and veggies. There are many positive ways we could see a chance for a new start here, and although there is so much fear, panic, and pain while we lose our loved ones, we can be reminded that they are not really gone, but their energy has been transformed to create a more abundant earth for us all, a mirror to us to show us what went wrong. If we learn from these lessons, then that is what is most important, and their energy is not wasted. Another way this virus is a mirror to us is by showing us how in a time of great need, we can come together and help one another instead of displaying selfishness. I just learned that many companies have been putting together care packages for senior citizens to help them. And stores like Woolworths is creating a senior shopping time to ensure the elderly can shop without being pushed around by the more youthful and sprite bodies. We are called to being a little more careful about one another, and washing our hands is a simple reminder we are hearing on the news, as we don't want to give it to others. We are thinking about our elderly as well as our young as we consider their needs along with our own by staying home. In the face of tragedy, we see the human spirit more clearly, one that comes together in times of need. I trust that in the way of the future, we won't need these tragedies to be conscientious of each other. It will just happen more naturally. And not only human to human, but humans will think more about nature and about the animals that we share this earth with. Already, China did put a ban on the wildlife farming, which is so great for the psyche of humanity and to help ensure a reality in the future without this pandemic and a better life for all creatures. As I stood back and observed everything around me shutting down and the last student saying goodbye for the 2 weeks, I saw two paths in my mind for where humanity can go. Either we keep on doing the same thing we have done in a few weeks' time and have this happen again, or we let history be the teacher. I know people may look at this time as an opportunity for martial law, reinforcements, and control of the government, But I have faith in people to believe that most people will not tolerate that, and that would only start a huge revolution that many in their cozy positions of power would not like. Instead, I see how everything truly needed a makeover, and we are getting it because ultimately there is only one trajectory path life can take, and it is to move forwards. We need to look at everything in a new light: the economic system, the animal food system, the healthcare system, the educational system, the industrial corporate system, the employment system, the energy system, and the heart center system of people. And so, as many people will be staying home, this is a time to look at our lives and reflect on them and see how we can make them better. Maybe it gives us pause to shut down public places mentally as well as protect us physically. I think this will be a well-needed pause and reflect for all of the world if they can do it, as the pandemic affects us globally. So how do we move on and use this tragedy as an opportunity to change our lives for the better? We each can take a look at our own selves in our own self-quarantine and look at ourselves up to this point in society as having our roles. Within our roles as citizens, we must ask ourselves if we are truly happy as free individuals, or are we dependent on corporations and the government? Are we each doing all we can to help sustain the earth and its nature and animals that help us too? Are we aware of our part within the collective that helps it move with others? The spiritual message I received from my guides and star family is that although at first it looks like overreaction and fear-mongering, everything happens for a reason on the quantum level. Just as in physics, one event will follow another event that causes its reaction, at the quantum energetic level, humanity has been placed on a pause unconsciously or consciously, from the subconscious as a moment to pause and reflect before we move forwards into this new earth together. Just as Tolkien said in all his wisdom, we cannot stop these great events from occurring, but we must look for the deeper meaning to them being in our reality in the first place. I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Love will be the greater motivator during this time, and what we may come to find is that what we love is everything on earth in order to save it, in order to make sure that we sustain every living thing on earth, like a giant organism that is evolving and growing together.